wonderful support person that's going to be helping me along. Usually you hear from Justin and occasionally Peter, but today I'm covering our topic. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can protect your children or loved ones if you have individuals as beneficiaries of your planning, how to protect them from themselves. And usually when we talk about this, it's in contrast to protecting children from others or protecting beneficiaries or loved ones from others. So today we're going to be focusing on protecting from themselves. When we're talking about protecting people from themselves, the most common things that we tend to address are individuals that have struggles with money, where they are maybe not great at saving, or they have some impulse control issues when it comes to spending. And if what you're leaving them, you're hoping can support them over a longer period of time, sometimes protecting someone from themselves when they have some of those impulses can be very valuable in your planning. We're also going to be discussing beneficiaries and loved ones that maybe have some addiction problems, drug abuse, alcoholism, gambling, things where, again, it tends to be an impulse control issue, but it goes a little bit deeper. So making sure that what you're leaving them isn't going to be using to support something that can be dangerous. We're also going to be discussing young people and receiving funds. Young people tend to be a unique class in terms of how you're planning for them. So we'll address that as well. And then finally, we're going to touch on a little bit of special needs planning, just because it can sometimes interact with some of the protecting people from themselves, depending on what it is that is creating the issue. So one of the things that I want to start with is the importance of power of attorney documents. I do a lot of family plans where, although I might be planning for parents, if children, especially young children or young adults, are getting into doing more on their own, but still relying a lot on mom and dad. So between the ages of like 18 and 30, especially if they're not married, where if anything happens, they're going to be looking to have other adults step in to assist. Having power of attorney documents where you can do that easily can be incredibly important, especially if there's an emergency situation. A lot of parents don't realize as soon as a child becomes 18, they're considered a legal adult and their health information is as protected as yours. So if something happens in an emergency and the individual or the child is not capable of consenting because they're not conscious or something like that, there might not be able to even be just basic information that's provided to parents and other loved ones. So power of attorney documents allows your kids to basically name parents or other individuals that they trust as people that can step in and help if needed, whether it's dealing with medical decisions or advocating from a medical standpoint, or it's financial decisions, making sure that their financial situation will be taken care of. Sometimes it's just helpful. A lot of 18-year-olds don't know how to argue about an insurance bill, or they don't understand the difference between a checking account and an investment account. So making sure that you're able to protect and guide them, using power of attorney documents, you can do so more easily, where you have more direct access. You can actually see accounts and help your child learn some of these skills. If they're going to be going abroad, I mean, I know right now, not many people are doing anything abroad, but if that is an opportunity that they have in the future, making sure that there's somebody that can take care of their stuff at home can be important. So power of attorney documents, just like for you, they're incredibly important to avoid things like guardianship, where you have to go to the actual court and request permission to become a guardian for somebody. Having power of attorney documents makes that process avoidable and much, much easier, where you can kind of step in if you're needed and the individual or child can continue doing things on their own whenever you're not needed. All right, so when we're talking about how to incorporate some special planning for loved ones where you're trying to protect them from themselves, we're going to start with young people. We've kind of already introduced that with the power of attorney document discussion, but young people and money tend to not be the best combination. And I say this in regard to all young people. I know that there's a lot of young people that are very responsible. They make good decisions. They're very smart. They get straight A's. They're in college, whatever it might be. The biology of a young person, your brain isn't fully developed until you are mid to later 20s. So if you are expecting somebody to receive a sum of money from you, and it's a sum of money that maybe they're not used to having. I mean, most 18-year-olds, most 22-year-olds, they might have $5,000 in their checking account as the most amount that they've ever had. So expecting them to be able to go from that to managing, $50,000 or $100,000, it just is an expectation that is often not realized. Now, impulse control becomes a challenge for them. It's not about what can this money do for my future. It's all about what can this do for me right now. It tends to become a distraction. So we've experienced a lot of different things when we've seen this, where maybe the proper planning wasn't in place, where kids are dropping out of school because all of a sudden they have a lot of new friends and they're paying for a lot of things for all of these new friends, and they just get distracted rather than worrying about the test that they have on Thursday. They're out on a Wednesday night at a concert. So making sure that this is going to be useful for their future over the long term becomes incredibly important. We want to make sure with young people that there's also an opportunity for them to learn how to manage this appropriately. So putting people in place to help them learn how to become a good steward of what it is that you may have provided for them can make a huge difference in their ability to be successful when it comes to using and benefiting from this over the long term. So having a period of time where maybe they become a co with the individual that you put in charge, so that they can understand how to deal with taxes, how to make investment decisions, how to work with a financial advisor. These are skills that you learn over time. This isn't something that you can either just read a book and instantly know, or that you're just expected to understand just because all of a sudden you have a sum of money that you've received. So making sure that we have people in place that you trust to help guide this process, and then giving them an opportunity to learn from this individual, where maybe they can get direct information from the financial advisor, the financial institution, but they can't make decisions about removing money without permission from the other individual. This gives them an opportunity to slowly create these skills. And over time, they're going to be much better at using it, like I said, over the long term. So ensuring that they have help along the way, and that they're not kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool, often really tells us whether or not they're going to be successful in this role when they are on their own. So young people, if we can have somebody in place so that good decisions are made when they're younger, even if they're, like I said, even if they're smart, even if they have straight A's, even if they're responsible, going from that to having a large sum of money that they have to manage. And large sum can be, like I said, between 5,000 and 50,000. That's a huge difference. If in your mind, if 50,000 doesn't seem like that much, or even 10,000 doesn't seem like that much, you really want to make sure that you're taking into account the fact that they are young and that they're still developing. So putting somebody with them so they can learn this over time, making sure they're making good decisions, and that your money is used for them and for their future, as opposed to a short period of time before it's gone. I believe the average right now in the US for how long an inheritance lasts, regardless of the amount, is a year. And that can be quite concerning when you're thinking about what you're hoping this is going to do. I have a lot of clients that are now looking at, rather than just leaving it to their children, they're incorporating multiple generations, because people are living longer, which means their kids are also living longer. And that means that their kids are probably older. I've got a lot of clients where by the time they're passing things to their kids are retired. And so whether or not this is going to be the best use of their money, they start spreading it out among multiple generations. That means that you really need to make sure that you're considering what the other generation needs, making sure maybe the parents of the grandchildren are in charge of these sums until they're at a more appropriate age. Okay, so young people and money, it's a bad combination. You want to make sure that you have good people in charge that you trust, that can teach them the skills for how they can manage this, whatever it is they may have received over their future. Our next topic is going to be protecting people from themselves, addiction issues. Unfortunately, sometimes the individuals that you want to incorporate into your planning have unique problems. When I'm talking about addiction, it's usually alcohol, drugs, or gambling. These are three areas where an individual can be the nicest person in the world, but they struggle with something on a regular basis. And there's a larger chance that they're going to use what you've left them to harm themselves. And it might be somebody that you really want to make sure that you are including in your estate plan. You don't want to eliminate them as a person. You want to keep them in the same way that maybe you've kept other people. You want to treat them as fairly or as equally as you do other individuals that you want to incorporate. You just have to make sure that you do so safely for them. So again, we're probably talking about putting somebody else in charge, making sure that the funds that you're leaving are used for basic living, like rent, or making sure that they have money for groceries, or things that they might need. But it's or even rehab, if there's some sort of treatment that they could gain benefit from, that what you're leaving is used for these things, and that it's not going to be used in a way that could be dangerous for them. So these types of unique problems, you can incorporate the planning into your estate plan. So whatever it is that you might leave to them, it's going to be safely transitioned. So you have somebody that can be a good steward of the funds and provide benefit to the individual, again, in a way that's safe. You may also want to consider doing something that's rather than it being a sum of money that can be accessed whenever it's needed. Maybe you also incorporate something where they're getting an amount over time, where it's a regular payment that they're receiving. So it's almost like a supportive allowance. And it's, again, used for things that provide their basic living expenses, that can support their lifestyle without it becoming a concern for anybody that they're going to use it in a way that could be harmful. So protecting people from themselves includes addiction and drug problems. We want to make sure that we're transitioning funds safely. And it might not be the individual that you're anticipating to receive. If your estate plan is set up in a way that you're transitioning what it is from one generation to the next, so if you have it going to a child, and if that child is deceased, it goes to their children, you need to not only think about the child that you are intending to include, but the grandchild or grandchildren that could receive if your child passes. So it isn't necessarily just the person that is going to receive something from you directly, but it could also be people that receive in the future if your circumstances change. You can put provisions in your estate plan so that if there is somebody with this problem, even if it's not a beneficiary you are expecting to have this issue, that it can be transitioned to them in a way that's safe. So if it goes to another generation, or if it goes to another beneficiary that wasn't originally included in your plan, you have these backup provisions, kind of these safety measures, so that this individual has this issue, we can make sure that we put this person in charge and that it's used for them, or we can set it up using a very specific staged payout so that we know that they're not going to have a large amount, they're just going to get smaller increments of regular amounts. That you can put individuals in charge to evaluate some of the situations and make these decisions, make these determinations, so that everybody, even unexpected beneficiaries, are able to receive safely from your plan. You don't have to disinherit people if you don't want to, because you're concerned about their lifestyle choices. You can just put some of the decision-making in somebody else's hands. Now, a lot of clients that I've talked with and worked through some of these issues with, one of the things I tend to recommend when it comes to putting somebody else in charge and making sure they're safe, I tend to discourage the use of siblings being in charge of other siblings' funds. So if you have a young person, or if you have a person with a substance abuse issue, putting their brother or sister in charge tends to create an uncomfortable or awkward dynamic for the two individuals. And their relationship can become all about access to these funds, which can be destructive to their relationship. There are alternative options if you want to keep the decision-making out of the hands of any family members, that it's just a separate thing. There are professional trustees that you can use for this purpose. We've got a number of good options in the area. The financial institution that you tend to work with the most, or the financial advisor, they might have some good options within their company as well. So make sure that you know what your choices are. Putting siblings in charge doesn't tend to be a great dynamic for the two of them. Sometimes you can put a sibling in as a co-trustee, maybe with a professional, so they can provide some of the sort of family perspective and family guidance, but the actual decision-making is still being done by a third party. This also helps the person that you are trying to do this planning for feel more independent, that they're not going to a family member to ask for money every time they need it. They have a separate professional that they go talk to. It doesn't become part of the relationship within the family. It helps them feel like it is their life. It is the money that is there to support them in a way that's safe, and they can deal with it on their own or through a professional. So sometimes that setting it up that way can help them really understand that you're doing this for their benefit over the long run. You're not trying to interfere with their independence or their own decision making. You're just trying to make sure that it's safely done. Okay, so we've talked about young individuals. We've talked about individuals with substance abuse issues. The final issue that we're going to talk about is probably one of the more common, and that's individuals that maybe aren't great with money. So we've talked about young people not being great with money as a general rule, but even as you get older than your mid to later 20s, not everybody ends up with a lot of impulse control. So if you have concerns that the individual that you're leaving money to, that they're going to be able, again, to use this for over the long run for their future, and the history of their financial issues, maybe they have a lot of creditor problems, that they've been sued, they've been taken to court over small claims actions, there are court judgments against them already, maybe they've been through bankruptcy, they've gone through a difficult financial time. These are indications potentially that maybe having them receive an unrestricted sum of money from you is not going to help them or better their situation. It can actually make it worse. So, I know everybody's probably heard stories about lottery winners and how quickly that can run out. If you don't have the good financial skills from the beginning to be able to take on a sum of money and invest it appropriately, deal with the taxes appropriately, feel like you're making good decisions because this is an area that you feel comfortable with, it can end up creating more of a detriment. Or like I said, with young people, it can be a distraction. If you want to make sure that somebody has the ability to develop these skills, or if they're just not going to develop these skills, making sure that it continues to be used to benefit their situation, you can have somebody else provide some instruction. You can put someone else in charge. That can be a family member or loved one. It can be a professional, making sure that they're working with them. You can have the individual be partially in charge. Maybe they can be like a co-trustee with the other trustee, but there are certain decisions that still have to be unanimous between maybe the professional agency or the family member and the individual that is the beneficiary, that it's an agreement between them that they are, if they're going to be taking out money or using it for different purposes. These things can be set up to automatically pay things like this is going to regularly pay your utility bill, or it's going to regularly pay your rent. These are things that you can set up as part of this. It's so that they feel like there's, still a certain amount of independence, and you may be hoping that they're going to develop some of these skills. So you can give some discretion for the other person that you have acting with the individual, or if they are in charge of the funds for the individual, you can give them some decision making where if in the future they do develop these skills and they are doing better financially, and the other person feels like they can really take this on, you can even give them the discretion to turn it over at some point in the future. You don't have to if it's a situation where the funds just need to be managed elsewhere. And although you want the beneficiary to receive the benefit from the funds, they're just never going to be in a good position to manage it. You can do that as well. I've had clients where their biggest hope or their biggest concern is the concept of their child or loved one being able to retire at some point, that they've never been able to save any money, that they just don't see how they're ever going to be able to retire. So a lot of the intention in the estate plan is to create something where they know that this child or loved one is going to be able to retire at some point because the money's going to be there, that either it can only be minimally used for them during the period of time where they're going to be working, and maybe the access opens up a little bit more after they reach a certain age. I've had clients where 65 is important, where maybe at that point they have more discretion and more use of the funds because they're hoping that there's going to be a period of retirement that the child or loved one can take advantage of. I've also done different incentive types of situations where the amount that the beneficiary or child has the ability to access is somewhat related to the level of income that they are creating themselves. So the more income that the child or beneficiary creates, the more money they have easier access to. So you can kind of create an incentive for the person to learn better financial skills, to continue working and developing professionally themselves. But you also know that it's going to be used safely, that you put somebody in charge or a professional agency in charge that you trust to manage this, and make sure that the person that you are providing this to, that they're going to receive long-term benefit. And you can make sure that the priorities that you have are also incorporated. So if the priority for this fund is I want it to pay specifically for rehab for an individual with a substance abuse issue, that can be the intention for the trustee. If you want it I want it to pay for basic living expenses, so rent, groceries, things like that's the priority here. You can do that. If this is a financial person who has some financial difficulty, it can be, you can even create sort of goals for them, completing certain classes with regard to financial literacy, so they can hopefully create some of these skills and do a better job themselves, and maybe in the future doing a better job with yours. So all of these are uniquely tailored to the individual beneficiary, where the person that you're incorporating into your plan, that there's something unique about them, and that's true of every beneficiary you have. We're just focusing today on beneficiaries with these particular challenges. You can incorporate them into your estate plan. You just have to make sure that you're planning for their individual situation. What are they capable of doing? What is it that maybe they have some challenges with? A sort of side note to this, with substance abuse problems, with impulse control issues, sometimes there can also be a mental health component to this, where the individual has a mental health issue that can raise to the level of disability. With young people, there are certain mental health issues that aren't diagnosed until they're older. So making sure, again, that you're planning for maybe things that are unforeseen. If the individual has a mental health issue now, but they're not considered disabled, but they could be in the future, this is another area that you want to make sure that you're aware of. You can do special needs planning for them. This allows them to continue to use the sum that you have left for them in a way that supplements other benefits or other programs that they may be reliant on. So not every individual that has these different challenges is also going to have a disability determination, but these two things can sometimes coincide. So ensuring that what you're leaving to the person is going to be used, again, over the long term and used to supplement their life, as opposed to replacing other benefits and programs that they may be receiving support from, can be a priority in your planning, whether it's a direct priority where we know that this is an issue, or where it's a potential where it might be a beneficiary that, again, isn't set to receive specifically, but could receive depending on whether or not circumstances change. Having these backup provisions in your plan can be invaluable to an individual in this situation. And you don't always know whether or not a person has a disability. Mental health issues, sometimes you don't know whether or not they actually have a disability determination. That sometimes doesn't come out until we are actually doing the administration. And then we find out, well, a beneficiary has a disability determination. They're eligible and receiving benefit from one or two programs that they really rely on in order to maintain their life. If now we're giving them the sum of money, it's going to interfere with their ability to maintain these things and then spend through what they have and then try to get back on these programs. And there are a lot of programs like this where it's the relationships that you develop with social workers, it's the relationships that you develop with individuals that are helping maybe with treatment, rehabilitation, or with other medical needs, where having them all of a sudden not have access to this can be very detrimental to them. So even having just these backup plans to ensure that if somebody is in this situation and you just didn't know that it was an actual disability for them and they had different programs, different benefits that they had arranged, you can ensure that what you're receiving is not going to interfere with that it can be used to supplement their lifestyle. Maybe they can move to a better apartment. Maybe they can participate in different camps or different types of treatment. I mean, there's a lot of different things that this can do for them. But what you're not doing is replacing what they already have and then forcing them to kind of get back on it at a later date after everything you've left them is exhausted. So some of these backup plans can really provide a lot of stability for an individual in this situation. So special needs planning is not always part of planning for an individual in one of these circumstances, but it can be. And having this as a backup plan in particular can be very important in your planning. So it's something that you should be aware of. We have quite a bit of information on all of these issues on our website, where we kind of go into some of these specifics, some of the examples of different situations, different types of planning we've done. There is a separate page on our website devoted specifically to special needs planning, so that can answer some questions there as well. We try to provide a lot of information. These webinars for us really are an effort to try to better educate you. We want to make sure that people understand the options that they have. So when they're thinking about the people that they're incorporating into their planning, they can do so in a way that's individualized, where every person needs something a little bit different from you. And you just need to make sure that you understand what that is and how you can provide for them safely and in a way that's beneficial to them, especially over the long run within your estate plan. So I believe we're just about out of time. I want to make sure that if there are any questions that I've answered them. I don't believe that there are. So I think we're good there. If you do have a question, please put it in now so we can address it. All of you are going to be receiving an evaluation form as part of this, and you can indicate on that form whether or not you'd like to meet with any of the attorneys at our office. The initial consultations that we do are all free of charge. Basically, we spend a couple of hours with you talking about your individual circumstances, your family, the people that you want to include in your planning. We go through kind of what you have financially, how you own things, and talk about what your intentions are. What is it that you want to try to do? And usually by the end of that conversation, we're able to give you some guidance on what you should be considering, give you a recommendation or an opinion on what the best plan to accomplish your goals and objectives based off of your situation and the individual circumstances of your beneficiaries. And then from there, you can decide what you want to do. So if that's something that you're interested in, please fill out the evaluation form and just indicate there that you'd like to. You can also call our office at any time and ask to set up an initial consultation. All of the attorney biographies are also on our website. If there's somebody you'd like to meet with in particular, we all do nothing but estate planning and elder law. So everybody at our office practices solely in this area, which is important. When you're seeking advice from an attorney, you always want to make sure that you seek advice from somebody that practices just what it is that you're asking them about, because you will always get better advice. I believe that our class for next week, the webinar next week, which is also going to be same time, same day, Wednesday at noon. What's lurking in your estate plan? Scary planning stories. So this is a little bit of fun with the week of Halloween, essentially. We're going to be talking about what is it that you might have in your planning that can create problems for either you or for your beneficiaries or for the administration of your plan that you might not be aware of. It's not always just about the actual plan or the documents that you have. Sometimes it can be centered around things like how you own property or how you've used beneficiary designations. There can be inconsistencies that you don't realize that you have simply because of how you're passing things and what documents you have versus how you have things titled, owned, or designated. So that can be a big part of that evaluation. You can access this at estateplanninglive.com. So that's been consistent for us. So hopefully it's starting to become familiar to you. All right, I think that we are out of time for today. I don't believe there were any questions. So that means apparently I explained everything perfectly to everyone's satisfaction. So I'm very excited about that. I hope that you join us again next week. Thank you so much.